Well, here on the channel, where we're approaching 100,000 real subscribers, we save our best stuff for the biggest moments. This is Byron. You're probably familiar with him from the live earlier today. That was in the plane. We had the Starlink in the plane. We flew all over the Bay Area. It was the seaplane. Well, a little bit of background on Byron. He actually flew the 49ers back home from Seattle in week 1 after they had beaten the Seahawks. Yes, the same Byron who flies this sucker. We went around the Bay Area today, but how's that for a sign for you? In case you're a little bit nervous, it's a little bit of a fact. Byron flew me around the Bay Area today, but he piloted a lot of planes. The 777 of the 49ers, United Airlines, and then this one today on the picture perfect day in San Francisco. So I'll take you for another flight here from the studio. We'll look at some of the sites today that you might not have seen yet, but we're going to talk about the 49ers and the Seahawks. And maybe we can take a look at the sites in just a little bit, because I have some good sites and stats to show you the night before this game. Clay Kubiak, by the way, is going to have 2 interviews now for head coaching positions. That's the 49ers offensive coordinator. The Raiders and the Steelers have both requested an interview with Clay Kubiak. He's going to get those out of the way after the 49ers play Seattle. Meanwhile, Robert Saleh, San Francisco's defensive coordinator, has interviewed with 4 different teams, or has 4 total interviews. 2 down already, 2 happening on Sunday. The most dangerous one, if you're afraid of Robert Saleh leaving the 49ers, seems to be the Baltimore Ravens, because they actually have a quarterback in place and it is a functional franchise. There are other teams where the descriptor of functional franchise would be generous. And I think it's very important for Robert Saleh, if he does get offered a head coaching position, to make sure that it is from a functional franchise, because it is unrealistic to think that you'll get more than 2 opportunities at this whole head coaching thing in the NFL. All right, more from the plane in a little bit. How about this? This is the biggest hinge point of the game tomorrow, and this is what we're going to be keeping a close eye on as the game approaches, when we get some injury updates. And I know that Seahawks fans are freaking out about Sam Darnold, but from the 49ers perspective, I think that Ricky Pearsall is the clearest hinge point of this game. How about this? The 49ers are 8-1 in games that Ricky Pearsall has played, and 8-0 in games that Pearsall has finished this season, including the game pictured here, a victory at Seattle in week 1. Quite literally the hinge point of that game. It was a stalemate. The 49ers were down 13-10. Both teams were struggling to score, and then Ricky Pearsall did this. Got behind Reek Woolen, pictured grasping for Pearsall and the ball. Brock Purdy threw a dime, and that tilted the game in the 49ers' favor. A few plays later, Jake Tonjes caught the touchdown from Purdy, and the 49ers won 17-13. No, Pearsall was not the only reason that this tipped toward the 49ers. Obviously, Nick Bosa had a big strip of Sam Darnold on the ensuing drive, but Pearsall was the reason that the 49ers had space to work with offensively that they did not have in week 18. They didn't have Ricky Pearsall, and they didn't have Trent Williams. Those are 2 massive, massive additions for the 49ers. There are some fans right now, I think it's especially Seahawks fans, but just bad football fans in general, who are trying to pretend like there's no big difference between week 18 and now for the 49ers. But there's a huge difference in terms of roster construction. And here you go. The 49ers will likely start 5 players, not counting Jake Tonjes, and I explain why a little bit lower, that they didn't start versus the Seahawks 2 weeks ago. Trent Williams, Ricky Pearsall, Eric Kendricks, Garrett Wallow, and Marquise Siegel. So that's 3 players on the defensive side of the ball, 2 players on the offensive side of the ball. At least 3+ players. By plus player, I mean needle mover in the positive direction. If you've got Trent Williams out there, he's been a needle mover in the positive direction. If you've got Ricky Pearsall out there, he's been a needle mover in the positive direction. And Eric Kendricks has undoubtedly been a needle mover in the positive direction. Now, TBD on Garrett Wallow. I think that we need a little larger sample size there, but he played really well against Philadelphia. TBD on Marquise Siegel, but I know that the 49ers are much faster at safety than they were the last time they faced the Seahawks. George Kittle is the one minus for the 49ers. They're not with a plus player in that regard because George Kittle has torn his Achilles and he's not going to be available against Seattle. As I say here in the tweet, you can argue about impact all you want. And you could argue, okay, well, what outweighs what? The George Kittle loss outweigh the gains of all these other players? Do what you want as far as arguing about impact, but please do not tell me that this is the same matchup that we saw in Week 18. Things are significantly different for the 49ers at many, many spots on the field, spread across the offense and the defense. Now, Pearsall is technically questionable. So we're going to wait with bated breath, maybe through tomorrow, maybe up until the 90-minute mark. I'll report from the stadium in Seattle tomorrow. If I find out sooner, then I'll let you know then too. But Ricky Pearsall right now is questionable. I know that he did practice ahead of the Week 18 game against the Seahawks, and he didn't play. And I think that the 49ers did not respond well to that because they didn't have the spacing that they needed to have to operate downfield. But I do view this as a true hinge point in this game. By the way, before we start our scenic tour of the Bay Area from today, a look at Ghirardelli Square, lit up in red and gold. I think that on X, I showed everybody the War Memorial Performing Arts Center and the Herbst Theater last night, red and gold. I'm sure that City Hall is red and gold tonight. I've got to go pick Lombardi herself up from the airport in just a little bit, so I'm going to swing by City Hall, and maybe I could post a video of that if it is in red and gold. Embarcadero Center also lit up in San Francisco, so this city is ready for the big game tomorrow. Speaking of this city, I know that you want to see more of this, and we can see more of this while we're talking. There was downtown San Francisco from the plane today, piloted by Byron. Byron's awesome, who flew the 49ers home from Seattle. One of United's best pilots lives here in the Bay Area, has got this seaplane, which is sweet. We were able to fly really low. Look, we're about at the height of the Salesforce Tower, circling around there in beautiful, sunny San Francisco. I think it's going to be sunny in Seattle as well, but it's going to be much, much colder than it was here in the Bay Area. So we got a lot to talk about, including the fact that Seattle has a world-beating run defense. I mean, I'm talking very upper right part of the quadrant. I'll show you guys the graphic in a little bit. I don't want to take away the nice views with a Seahawks graphic, but it is what the 49ers are up against in this game. And, you know, Seattle, you have to remember that the 49ers did not need the run game to operate at massive efficiency to beat the Seahawks in Week 1. I don't think that it is possible to beat the Seattle Seahawks running. Let me reframe this. I don't think that it's reasonable to expect a massive rushing performance against this defense. If you want to know why, well, let's pause for a second. Let's remove the Golden Gate Bridge for just a bit, and let's put this up there. This is what the Seattle Seahawks look like defensively this year. Further to the right is better pass defense. Further up is better run defense. The Seahawks have been complete outliers in terms of run defense this year. The bad news for the 49ers is that I don't think that it's possible to run efficiently against these guys unless you get really lucky and there's some kind of huge broken tackle at the exact wrong spot. But even in that case, you probably would need a couple missed tackles because they play really, really soundly up front, the Seahawks do. So I would argue that the bad news, obviously, is the running is going to be very, very hard, if not impossible, to do efficiently against Seattle. But the good news is that it is not necessary to run efficiently to beat these guys, as Brock Purdy demonstrated in Week 1. What you have to do is run at volume to keep their pass rush at bay, keep the pass rush on its heels so it can't be on its toes. If a defense knows that you're going to throw on every single down, you're in trouble against an elite defensive front. You saw that at the end of the game against the Seahawks. They just blew by the 49ers offensive line. Purdy got crunched. He suffered the stinger. It wasn't good. So you have to keep the defense on its heels. You have to have them thinking that maybe you will run. They at least have to dedicate some mental energy to the run game. To do that, you've got to run the ball more than 12 times. The 49ers only ran the ball 12 times against Seattle in Week 18. They ran the ball 36 times against the Seahawks back in Week 1. And that, my friends, was the key to victory, even though they were only at 3.3 yards per carry. It wasn't an efficient run game, but it was a volume run game. And the reason the 49ers were able to get volume runs in is because they made enough stops defensively to make the Seahawks punt so they could get the ball themselves. They stopped the Seahawks' own run game. That was huge. But also, the 49ers converted third downs with Brock Purdy's arm in that first game. They went 7 of 14 on third down in Week 1. They went only 2 of 9 on third down in Week 17. What was different between Week 1 and Week 17 with the 49ers pass game? Because the run game struggled in both. Ricky Pearsall and Trent Williams. I don't think that it's all that complicated for the 49ers. I think that they need pass protection and they need separation against the Seattle Seahawks team. Maybe then you can start to establish a little bit of a run game as the game goes on if this guy can separate and if big number 71 can pass protect at a high enough level. It's not rocket science, but it's very difficult and it's hard to walk the tightrope the 49ers are walking without their personnel available. They paid Brandon Ayuk $30 million a year because they knew they needed a separator at the wide receiver position, just like any offense in the history of the league needs separation at the wide receiver position. When Brandon Ayuk was not available this year after he defected from the team, it became very clear that Ricky Pearsall would have to be the hinge point that pushed the 49ers forward in terms of space making on the field. Another crazy stat for you is that San Francisco finished ranked dead last, number 32 in average yards of separation at the time of catch or incompletion in 2024. That was the Ayuk-less year after Week 7, whenever he got hurt. And Ricky Pearsall, well, he was coming off getting shot in the chest, and he was a rookie, and he didn't play all that much up until the back half of the season. And then things got better in the final 2 weeks where Ricky Pearsall had some big games, but it was too little too late. Obviously, the 49ers were already eliminated by that point. But it was clear that Ricky Pearsall, if he could be available, would be a difference maker for the 49ers. And when he has been available, he has been a difference maker for San Francisco this year. So this is the very biggest thing to watch entering tomorrow. Now, we can also talk about the Seattle situation with Sam Darnold. I get that this is a potentially huge deal. I just don't have any more information. And the Seahawks people don't have any more information either. Sam Darnold felt some oblique tightness before the final practice of the week. Sam Darnold was limited at that final practice of the week. We saw that Drew Lock took some snaps for the Seattle Seahawks. I'm not sure what happened today at Seattle's final walkthrough. They don't have to disclose what happened today, but they did say that they were going to test out the Sam Darnold oblique tomorrow before the game begins. If Darnold is not able to go, that is obviously a huge shift in the prospects of this game. Drew Lock is a career backup quarterback. He did notch a really big win over the Philadelphia Eagles in the 2023 season that helped the 49ers overtake Philadelphia for the 1 seed, but he wasn't all too great in that game, and he's not been good over the course of his career, where Darnold, despite the question marks about him and potential choke jobs in the postseason, we saw one last year against the Rams. At the very least, Darnold has done really, really good stuff on the football field as a starter over the course of the past 2 years. First for the Minnesota Vikings in 2024, and this year for the Seattle Seahawks. Enough at least to get Seattle into a position where they finished 14-3. Now, defensively and special teams, if you just isolated those two phases of the game, the Seahawks are one of the greatest teams of all time. It's the offense that has held them back from being truly one of the top 5 greatest teams of all time. If you put Brock Purdy on this year's Seahawks, if you put the number 1 quarterback in football, or number 2, Drake May finished ahead of Brock Purdy in some of the efficiency stats, so I want to give him the credit that's due. But Purdy's obviously one of the very best in football. He's an elite quarterback. If you put Purdy on the Seahawks, they would likely be one of the greatest teams of all time. That's what the metrics tell us. That's what the record tells us. Ultimately, everybody is judged by wins and losses, and the Seahawks have won a lot and lost a little this season. But they don't have Brock Purdy. They have Purdy's former backup. They have Sam Darnold. And Darnold has been good at times this year, but he's been bad at times this year. And generally, it's trended more toward the bad than the good over the course of the last month and a half of the season. It's been very, very shaky for the offense. Thankfully for the Seahawks, the defense has just entered supercharger mode. The special teams has been a top 2 unit, maybe even a top 1 unit the whole year. They've been neck and neck with the 49ers. And that's been enough to overcome so far. But there's a reason why Darnold is at the fulcrum of all these questions entering the game. And I think that the big key for the 49ers in this one is to take Darnold and the Seahawks to what you see up on the screen right now, to deep water. Look, I even shifted to the Pacific Ocean now. This is just outside of Half Moon Bay, that Pacifica area. That is deep water. That is the Pacific Ocean. That is the Great White Shark Triangle. The most great white shark attacks on humans happen within the area of the Great White Shark Triangle, which Byron right there is flying over. Sharks take their prey to deep water. The 49ers are based very near that Great White Shark Triangle. They've even nicknamed one of their players in the past a shark. That was K'Wan Williams. Now Upton Stout is playing his position. But by deep water, I mean something very, very simple. Keep this game close. Keep it within a score entering the fourth quarter or deep into the fourth quarter. Make Sam Darnold execute the plays necessary to win this game at crunch time. Find out if he can sink, or find out if he can swim, or if he's going to sink in this deep water. Thought that it was perfect that we were flying above today. Another thing that I thought was perfect, that we were in the sky, and Sky Moore could end up being a difference maker in this game. This is something that a lot of people are not talking about right now. But Sky Moore, the 49ers returner, was with Kansas City during the course of the preseason, and he returned a punt for a touchdown at Seattle in the preseason. A few days later, the 49ers traded for Sky Moore. And I walked up to Sky's locker maybe 2 weeks ago, and I wanted to ask him about that punt return in Seattle, because, you know, that was the highlight for him over the course of the past several months. And it was right before he changed teams. And Sky immediately said, I think that's the reason that I'm here. Meaning that's why the 49ers traded for Sky Moore. They saw this guy return a punt for a touchdown in the preseason in the same stadium that they're going to play in tomorrow night, that their fans might take over tomorrow night. The 49ers saw that. They said, we need a return specialist, because Junior Bergen, unfortunately, you know, he had just muffed the punt in the preseason game for the 49ers. He's still on the team. He's on the practice squad, but he's a rookie that needs more experience, needs more seasoning. So the 49ers said, we need a veteran presence here. We just saw this guy return a punt for a touchdown for the Kansas City Chiefs. So we are going to trade for him. And the 49ers made the trade for Sky Moore, and it's been one of the big, more hidden boosts that this team has enjoyed all season. It also leads me to remember the big change in special teams production that we saw for the 49ers post the first Seattle game. I can talk all I want about the 5 new starters that the 49ers are going to have relative to week 18, but I think it's really important that I talk about how different the 49ers are special teams wise than the last time they entered Seattle. So remember that Jake Moody was the 49ers kicker back then. Moody missed 2 field goals against the Seattle Seahawks. Also, take a look at this. You can see surfers down below us at Ocean Beach. They're little specks in the water, but we're flying so low that you could see the wetsuits and everything. They're out there. Well, what a day to surf, by the way, at Ocean Beach. That is the Sunset District in San Francisco. Ocean Beach is one of the largest uninterrupted stretches of sand in the state of California. It is often enveloped in fog. It is often cold, but just for us today, just so we can get this flight in with Byron, it was warm. It was 70 degrees. It was sunny in January. Unfortunately, the game cannot be played here in the Bay Area because the 49ers did not win that Week 18 game. But we did get the check-in buzz right over the Surfers, and now I could start talking about the 49ers special teams and how different it is. Moody missed those 2 kicks. They cut him after that Seattle game. They brought in Eddie Pinheiro, and he's only missed once, and it was in December from 64 yards against the Indianapolis Colts, so it can be forgiven. As now, look at that, Golden Gate Park. That was one of the cool parts of the flight today, is that we just got to zoom through different parts, different neighborhoods of San Francisco. The trivia on Golden Gate Park is that it is larger than Central Park in New York. I think from this vantage point, you can understand how. On the right of Golden Gate Park is the Sunset District. To the left of it is the Richmond District. Shout out to everybody watching from there, downtown in the distance. And then this area is very aptly named Land's End. Yes, somebody shouting out to the beach chalet in the comments section. Land's End is the Cliff House, which is currently closed but should reopen within a few months as a food hall concept. And then you've got the Sutro Baths, which burned down in the 70s. Probably an insurance arson situation, but shouldn't talk more about that unless we consult an attorney. Anyway, now we're on the right side of the Golden Gate Bridge. Now we're going to be approaching downtown San Francisco. So special teams is very different, but this is also the special teams Super Bowl. The 49ers and the Seahawks are the top 2 units in the league. And if you take away week 1 where the 49ers had Moody as their kicker, the 49ers would rank number 1 in the entire NFL special teams wise. The reason that I have to bring up special teams is, well, the historical precedent of this game is the 2021 divisional playoff against the Green Bay Packers, where the 49ers were coming off a win over the number 2 seed Cowboys as the 7. They were the wild card. On the road, San Francisco flew back to the Bay Area. Then they turned around and flew to Green Bay. Green Bay was the 1 seed. Green Bay was heavily favored by about a touchdown, a little bit smaller favorite than this game against the Seattle Seahawks. The 49ers were in dire straits, I thought, injury-wise, entering that game against the Packers. Jimmy Garoppolo had 2 injuries to his throwing arm, one on his thumb, broken thumb, one on his shoulder. That would require surgery in the offseason. The 49ers were beaten up defensively. They were starting Dante Johnson at a cornerback position. The 49ers were down weapons on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, it was tough. It was really tough. Nobody gave them a chance. They had to walk the tightrope, but they walked it successfully. And the reason they were able to do it is because they scored on special teams, and they prevented Green Bay from scoring on special teams with a blocked field goal. The Jordan Willis was the man who registered both of those blocks, and they're amongst the biggest plays in 49ers postseason history. San Francisco needed every bit of the greasiness of those contributions and that score on the punt block to beat the Packers 13-10 in overtime. Is there a path to beat the Seattle Seahawks without similar greasy luck, if you will, if you're the 49ers? Sure. I think it requires Ricky Pearsall to play. I think it requires Trent Williams to be feeling pretty good about himself physically, because I don't think that he was close to 100% last week, although he upgraded in practice from a limited participant to a full participant. So I think that things for Trent are trending in the right direction. No George Kittle certainly hurts the equation. I think the path to a clean victory for the 49ers is really, really narrow, and it might require Brock Purdy playing nearly flawless football. And against the number 1 defense in the league, that's really hard to do, which is why the 49ers are underdogs in this game. But if you get the break of special teams, a bounce here, a bounce there, a fumble here, a fumble there, a blocked punt here, a blocked kick there, all of a sudden the math of the game can change, and it can give you more margin for error on offense and defense. And that's what happened in the snow globe at Green Bay. The 49ers got a much larger error for their offense and defense, and their defense was lights out, by the way, but it still gave up a touchdown early. They gave themselves extra margin for error thanks to what special teams was able to do. Now, one thing is that the Packers were one of the worst special teams units in football that year. So I think that the door was more open to a greasy special teams play working in the 49ers' favor in that game than it will be in this one because the Seahawks are also really good. But since the 49ers are, at worst, the number 2 special teams unit in football, they have the capability of making a game-changing play. Football can be random as hell, too, in a game-by-game situation. The ball can bounce a certain way, can clang off somebody's pads a weird way. The turf can make it spin funny, and there could be a takeaway because of that. So don't shut the door on the 49ers special teams being able to make a play that erases a lot of the disadvantage on paper that the 49ers face entering this football game. Please do not shut the door on that. I do not think it would be particularly intelligent or smart to do so. Let's start flying back over San Francisco again. I think that we can rewind back to the spot where we were circling around Land's End. I think this is a good area to advance over the Golden Gate Bridge and now go back over downtown one more time. Wait until you see Byron stick this landing. I know that we didn't. No, we did show you the landing in Half Moon Bay earlier today on the live, but what we didn't do is show you the landing back in Marin County, which was wildly impressive on a tough airport. But first we had to fly around San Francisco and cut back up the coast. Anyway, 100,000 real subscribers are right around the corner. Mike, where are we at right now in terms of subscribers? We're, I've said that if we can get to it by tomorrow, then the 49ers are going to win this game. If we don't, then I don't know. I'm not sure. We're getting closer and closer. Hopefully Mike is listening right now so he can give me the updated subscriber total, or I could just look myself. We're at 99,287. So we're still 713 away from 100,000 real subscribers. How about that? Let me take my face off of it for a second. So you guys can see North Beach, Joe DiMaggio from that neighborhood, Little Italy. You guys see Washington Square, lower right corner right there with the 2 steeples of the church. That's St. Peter and Paul. Coit Tower at the very bottom right now as well, the monument to the city's firefighters. San Francisco, the flag of this city is a phoenix rising from the ashes. And I think that flag is very, very fitting for this team, this San Francisco 49ers iteration in 2025. Because this team has risen from the ashes several times already, including from the ashes of that Week 18 defeat to the Seattle Seahawks. I think that they have embodied what the spirit of San Francisco has been ever since the great fires of the 1850s. And then you move forward to the big earthquake in 1906. And that earthquake almost burned the whole city down. The city flag was adopted shortly thereafter. And it is that phoenix rising from the ashes. I'm going to find a picture of it for you guys and get it up on the screen. We can return to this flyover of downtown San Francisco in just a little bit. But first, I'm showing you this. That's it. That's the flag. That is the city seal. It's on the shoulders of police officers. And you can see the flames right under the phoenix right there. I could zoom in on them. And then you could see the obviously the phoenix rising from the ashes. And the 49ers history is very, very tied with this theme. The 1981 team that ended up winning the Super Bowl for the 49ers for the first time ever won that Super Bowl on the heels of a lot of devastation in the city over the course of the late 1970s. You had a double assassination at City Hall. You had a lot of crazy stuff happen in the late 70s. You could look it up. The Jonestown Massacre, the double assassination. You had a lot of stuff that happened in the 70s, and it just wasn't a good time in general in American urban areas. You talk to a lot of people around this city who were around at that time, and they'll tell you that the 49ers breakthrough to knock off the Dallas Cowboys, the big bad Cowboys in 1981, was something that this city really needed. It was part of the recovery for this city. It was a huge part of the recovery for this city coming out of the 1970s. So that was the 81 Super Bowl. Then the team became the dynasty of the 1980s, moving forward into the 1990s. Of course, there's been a Super Bowl drought now that is over 3 decades long. And I think that the 49ers will have excellent chances to win the Super Bowl over the next couple of years because they currently are in year one of a 3-year roster reset cycle. Their best shots at this will probably come in 2026 and 2027. But what's so special about this 2025 team is that even though they were counted out, even though it looked like it had all burned down, they have risen from the ashes of a mass injury event to give themselves a shot to win the Super Bowl, I think, a year early in what has become a fairy tale story. And one of the most beautiful things about all of this for the 49ers is that they are playing with house money at this point because of the dynamics that I'm talking about. But they're also playing with this history of the city. They're playing with the history of the franchise, and they're playing with the history of this 49ers Seahawks rivalry. Let's be honest. The last time that the 49ers went up to Seattle for a playoff game, it did not end well, and it was devastating to not only the franchise, but to its fans. I don't think that the stakes of this one are the same. I think that the 49ers and their fans should be okay leaving this one regardless. And that might be the beauty of the opportunity at hand for the 49ers. When was the last time that San Francisco played a postseason game with a true house money feel? Honestly, when was the last time that the 49ers entered a playoff game where you felt that they truly just house money, nothing to lose? They're going to be fine even if there's a loss because they've already made it so far and they've showed so much. The context of the situation tells us that they're going to be way better set up in 2026 and 2027. We were all talking about this in the offseason. We said this is year one of the reset. They've got to give the young guys some experience. They've done that. They're going to get injured guys back in 2026, and Purdy's going to be your more experienced, and that's when the 49ers can start pushing the chips toward the middle of the table. So right now, this opportunity against the Seahawks, it's a similar vibe as last week that I reported from the locker room. There's this calm around the 49ers. There's this excitement around the 49ers because they are playing with nothing to lose. And the most dangerous adversary is the one with nothing to lose. So when was the last time, or has there ever been a time, when the 49ers were playing with this amount of house money in the postseason? It definitely wasn't in any of the Shanahan years. You could argue maybe 2021, because they had come back from the dead. Phoenix rose from the ashes in 2021. They were 3-5, and they made it with the win against the Rams in Week 18, and then they were squeaking by against the Cowboys and the Packers. But I would argue that team was so veteran-laden that every opportunity that it had, you had to try to take a bite out of the apple. It wasn't like, okay, yes, of course they were better in 2022, but Jimmy Garoppolo and his future was really uncertain at that point. After Jimmy finished that 2021 season, he had a press conference saying goodbye to all the fans because they had drafted Trey Lance in 2021, and they're planning to hand the keys over to Lance in 2022. It was only by miracle that they were able to retain Jimmy Garoppolo. The shoulder surgery certainly helped, but they retained him, and then they were able to turn to him to save the season after Lance went down in 22, and then Brock Purdy came in after Jimmy went down to save the season. So that's how we ended up at this quarterback spot for the 49ers. But I think in the moment, there was not a house money feeling in 2021, especially since the main position quarterback was a guy who nobody was sure what the future for him would be. Everybody assumed that it would be his last year with the 49ers. So it was like, okay, well, they better win before they hand the keys over to Trey Lance because you don't know if he's going to be good. And he ended up not being good. 2019, people might argue that was a house money kind of year just because they got really good really fast. But I don't know if you can ever have a house money postseason game if you're the number one seed. Similar to 2011, that was the first year of Jim Harbaugh, and they won the 1 seed and they made it to the playoffs. It's really hard to convince me that you could have nothing to lose if you earned the 1 seed during the season, no matter how upstart you were to earn the 1 seed. Because when you're the 1 seed in the NFL, mathematically, you have such a good chance to make it to the playoffs that even if it is a building year or even if you're a year ahead of schedule, you can't blow that opportunity. There is pressure on you regardless of the circumstances if you own that 1 seed. You can't get away from it. So 2019 49ers 1 seed, pressure on them. 2011 49ers 1 seed, pressure on them. Screw the upstart status. They needed to win those years, and they felt it when they lost. 2019, they felt it in the Super Bowl. 2011, they felt it when Kyle Williams fumbled a couple times in the NFC Championship game in the rain at Candlestick against the New York Giants. So I think the Seattle Seahawks are in that position this time. They're in the 1 seed spot where the 49ers are kind of like the Giants in 2011, coming into Candlestick as a low seed NFC title game. The Seahawks are the 1 seed with a shaky quarterback situation, just like the 49ers were with Alex Smith back then. And the 49ers can work to take the Seattle Seahawks to as deep of water as possible, kind of like the Giants did in 2011. And this could be a game that in many ways for the 49ers offers redemption for both 2011 and 2013, or at least for their fans. I mean, obviously a lot of the front office, or not a lot of it, but the ownership level is still the same for the 49ers, but that the fans remember the devastating losses in 2011 and 2013. This is a way to atone for some of those without having all too much on the line on the floor falling out, right? Again, they have already maximized this season. Whatever the 49ers get moving forward is just further maximization beyond what already has been maximized. And I know that's an oxymoron. How can they maximize it even more? But you guys have all been watching this. We all have 2 eyes and a brain. We all see what's going on with this 49ers season. It has been downright extraordinary. They're going to be emulated. They're going to be copied. Robert Saleh and Clay Kubiak will probably be hired by other teams just because they were around what the 49ers were able to overcome this year. Steve Young said it on KMBR the other day. He said, you know what? Like, I think that this 49ers team is going to be studied. And what better way to study it than to bring in some of the key players from the building? I think it comes down to culture. I think it comes down to the fact that their resilience, their spirit has matched that of the city that they call home. I think that the 49ers have instilled a lot of this under Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch going back to 2017, and they've stuck true to one of their main mantras. It's not an official mantra, but they believe that people create culture. And they have been adamant about getting the right people in the building from a personality perspective. Obviously, you still want football talent to go with it, but you want both of those things. And I think that has allowed the 49ers to excel at the way that they have, even through so much adversity. I mean, it's not just this season. We talk about the fact that they've been the most injured team in the league ever since they left Candlestick, but it's also what happened in 2020 to the football team beyond the injuries. They had to move out to Arizona. 2021 was insane with the injuries they overcame, just like this year. But then the losses too, some of the gut-punching losses that have those, because the 49ers have bounced back from those, this veteran core, I think those have forged some metal as well. And because of that, they're going to be the experienced team heading into this game, regardless of whether or not they've got Fred Warner and George Kittle in there with them in uniform. Obviously, they're not going to have those 2 guys tomorrow, but they've been around the building. Warner even got a practice in this week. Kittle, they're playing for George Kittle. Ricky Pearsall even said that after his interview the other day. A local Seattle Seahawks merchant burned a Fred Warner jersey ahead of the matchup against the 49ers. Wow, good for him. Mike just sent that to me. I'm not going to even share that. Let's not give that clown any bit of a fuel. It looked like he used some fuel to burn the jersey. It looked like he was pouring lighter fluid on something. Sometimes those people are so stupid. Those are the types of people that pour gas on a jersey that's already on fire or that they're lighting, and then they're surprised that the stream of gas that they're pouring ignites in their hand. I've seen stuff like that happen before, but yeah, burning a jersey in a street doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, especially since the guy's not even going to be playing against you anymore. I mean, Fred Warner delivered one of the most valuable contributions of the week for the 49ers, and that was to rally the team into an energetic practice on Thursday or Wednesday of this week. It was the Thursday on the schedule, but the Wednesday. The 49ers, I talk about all the differences between week 1 or week 18 and now. And roster-wise, here are the differences. Another massive difference is that the 49ers practiced in this week, and they didn't practice ahead of week 18. I think that's really, really significant. They got a practice in, even though they were more tired this week than they were in week 18, at least in theory, because they had an East Coast trip to face the Philadelphia Eagles in a tough game, a physical game against Philadelphia in the playoffs. So how'd they get that practice in this week? They used the cheat code. They used Fred Warner. They got him out there, and he was a massive spark plug for the 49ers on that Wednesday. And then they said, you know what, Fred, thank you. We needed that. We're going to shut you down until next week. We're going to try to get this win without you. We're going to play this safely for your future. Even though Fred really wanted to play, they stuck to the original plan, even though he was pushing to move that original plan up. But he gave the 49ers what they needed on that Thursday. He continues conditioning now, and maybe, just maybe, Fred's going to be able to play in an NFC championship game if San Francisco can pull off this massive upset. They did against Green Bay 4 years ago, and now the 49ers are going to be trying to do it against the Seattle Seahawks, the number 1 seed here in 2025. 26 technically, but the 2025 season. Who wants to see the landing from Byron? Who wants to know how this might end? Because I think that the landing is something that might be, I don't know, representative of how this might go for the 49ers. It was a really challenging landing on our flight. And he had to get over some power lines, but also be low enough to land on a runway that curved. And this is the guy who flew the 49ers from Seattle after the win in week 1. So I felt like I was in good hands. And I indeed was in good hands. But wait, let's just, you guys know that this ended up all fine because I'm sitting here doing a live. But let's just watch Byron's landing skills. Absolutely locked in. Wearing his 49ers hat. Coming up on the very narrow runway. Oh, here are the power lines he was talking about. Yeah, you cannot be too low, or else your plane is just going to get ensnared by these. You also can land in a marsh. Thankfully, Byron's done this in the military. I mean, this is intense. It's cutting down the throttle, and oh my goodness. What a job. Not a bump at all. He gets it done. We're going to need a post-landing interview now as soon as he slows this thing down. Look at this. This thing curves up here. But he has done the job. Unbelievable. All right. We're flipping this around. What was the most difficult part of that?
You know, there's a couple power lines. There's a little bit of wind, and there's no room for error with the mountain there at the other end of the runway. And let's hope tomorrow the Niners take care and do the same thing, and keep your eye on the prize, keep your eye on the runway, right? Can't lose sight of that goal and touching down safely. So hopefully we got a few touchdowns safely tomorrow.
You hang out with me for a couple hours and you start using really corny segues, but you also he was a really good pilot before I came in here, so it's good. He deserves to do that. All right, guys, take care. All right, good job, Byron. Let's clap for Byron. Byron is flying me up to Seattle tomorrow, too. So he flew the 49ers home from Seattle back in week 1. They won that game. So if that's a sign for you guys, I don't know. Who's nervous? You can raise your hands if you are. But I think that Byron's going to get the job done tomorrow, too. And now we could talk about the 49ers trying to do the same in 2025. in 26. It's crazy. We're already in 2026. 15 years after, well, I guess 14 years after that 2011 season that I was just talking about, because they played the playoffs in 2012. He absolutely greased that landing. Oh, he got some good comments. Byron's going to really like this. He absolutely greased the landing. No, we're flying in a much nicer plane up to Seattle tomorrow, much faster plane. This one, the seaplane's really nice. Don't get me wrong, but it only goes like 130, 150 miles an hour. It's a seaplane. It's meant for tours. We're taking a jet up to Seattle tomorrow. I mean, I can swim if it crashes, but the great thing about the seaplane is that it could land like on the water. So it's probably not going to crash on the water because you have the ability to float on the water. It's great technology. Of course, I'm going to the game. If you are, I might see you there tomorrow. Thanks for your super sticker. Really glad that we're able to show people the Bay Area and San Francisco, even if you're not from around here or if you haven't been here. I think that's been one of the great joys of making some of these videos. All right, do we have any questions here? I think that I'm going to make this video exactly 49 minutes long. I think since we've been doing all this 49ers themed stuff surrounding the number 49, we're at 49th Avenue in San Francisco, which is actually the beach in San Francisco, but there are 49 avenues, which is cool. It's called La Playa. Everything is 49ers themed in this city. It's really cool. By the way, look who made the trip to Seattle with the 49ers. This will get you fired up. Fred Warner. It's him getting on the plane. I believe that looks like it's in San Jose. It's a little too warm to be Seattle. Oh, we got people saying 24-10 49ers. That'd be wild. What if they went in there and they blew the Seahawks out like that? This you guys will enjoy this. I was looking at flights tomorrow. I was curious to see what the demand was for flights. SFO is a big major hub airport. Seattle is a major hub airport. And there were no flights left for sale before 1 or 2 p.m. Basically, everything that would get you there in comfortable time to get there in time for kickoff was sold out. That's probably like 10 or 11 flights worth from San Francisco alone. There are 2 other airports in the Bay Area. There's Oakland and there's San Jose as well. And 49ers fans can come in from multiple different parts of the country, not just the Bay Area. But from San Francisco alone, 10 flights, about 10. I don't know exactly how many there were because they weren't showing up. But I could tell you that there were 10 flights later in the day. So I'm guessing that there were about 10 flights before. Were not even for sale anymore tomorrow morning because 49ers fans had bought out all the seats to head up to Seattle. They took over the stadium in week 1. Will they take over the stadium again? It's going to be a lot harder because the Seahawks are begging people and threatening people not to buy tickets, and they're saying you're going to lose your season tickets in future years if you do, and a bunch of crap. I mean, give me a break. Isn't this a capitalist country? If you buy season tickets, you should be able to resell them. But I guess they don't believe in that up in Seattle. But they're afraid that there's going to be too much red at this stadium tomorrow. Let's just put it that way. And the more that there is, the better a shot the 49ers have of maybe even putting Seattle into a silent count. I doubt that's going to happen because I think you need a majority of fans. And it wasn't, it was close to 50-50 in week 1. It might have been 40% 49ers fans, which is still hugely significant. But it's definitely something to keep an eye out for tomorrow. All right, everybody. I want to end this at the 49-minute mark just because it's been an honor. If you guys want me to come live tomorrow morning or do a show tomorrow morning before I fly out, I'll be happy to. But hit that subscribe button. We're trying to get to 100,000 real subscribers, just like I said at the top of the show. We are exactly 700 away. So the 49ers need to, if you're nervous and you want them to win, make sure I hit the 100,000 before this game starts. Thanks for watching.